Hey there, everyone. I want to welcome you back to another episode of Laughter Through Tears, the 120 podcast, where we talk about all things sepsis, chronic illness, and disability. Chronic illness and disability being related, of course, to sepsis because a lot of us are at higher risk for sepsis because of that. So welcome back, everybody. I'm Jackie. I am a septic shock survivor. I also have chronic illnesses, POTS, Crohn's, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, been disabled quite a while. And almost 5 years ago now, I developed septic shock from a colon perforation from undiagnosed diverticulitis. Had me flown to Baltimore. I live in central Maryland, so had me flown 75 miles away so that they could do emergency surgery and save my life. And then afterwards, as I got better, I decided I wanted to do this podcast to elevate all of our voices in the sepsis community, in the chronic illness community. And I'm very excited here today. I have a guest all the way over in the UK. In 2025, Stephen Moore, Isle of Wright native, was appointed as the first Chief Executive Officer of Sepsis Research, FEAT, the UK's leading charity that's dedicated to funding research into sepsis, research that is badly needed. Stephen brings decades of experience in business growth and strategic development. He's founded 5 companies and advised more than 40 others. He is now excited to bring that commercial experience to his role at Sepsis Research FEAT as it seeks to expand and grow its work. Stephen, thank you so much for being here with me today.
You're very, very welcome, Jackie, and hello to all the listeners. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you here from the UK.
Yes, and thank you so much for giving us some of your time and your expertise this morning. So I wanted to get right into it and ask about how this organization, Sepsis Research FEAT, got started. It was something I noticed on Instagram a few years ago, and then I got to meet the wonderful Abby, of course, and, I just watch the work that you're doing and the work the organization is doing is absolutely marvelous. So if you could just take us all on a little journey and just describe how that all unfolded.
Of course, Jackie. So our founder is Craig Stobo. He's our chair at present, and it was set up some 13 years ago. It's a very sad story. He and his wife had one child. His wife was called Fiona. She was a doctor. They were living in Edinburgh in Scotland, and they were expecting their second child in September 2012. Now, I understand that on the evening of Friday, the 24th of August, she was taken into hospital with her unborn child, Isla, and very quickly developed, the antenatal had said she was fine, but very quickly she was diagnosed with infection, which subsequently became sepsis. At 5 o'clock the next morning, Fiona unfortunately lost Isla, the baby, and thereafter went into a worse and worse critical condition with the sepsis. The nurses and doctors fought incredibly hard for a further 24 hours, but very sadly at 1:50 in the morning of the Sunday, she passed. And it's an incredibly sad story. Craig also had sepsis at the same time. And so they already had one child. For him to have suffered and to have lost both a wife and a child is an incredibly hard thing to do. As an illustration of what a stoic individual he is, he decided to set up Sepsis Research FEAT. Now, for the benefit of the listeners, I will explain the FEAT. So Fiona was a doctor, so she was Dr. Fiona Elizabeth Agnew, and so hence the FEAT, it's Fiona Elizabeth Agnew Trust. And when we were first formed, way before my time, I've done 7.5 months. We'll talk about that later. It was called FEAT. And it was set up as a trust. But then later in 2019, and I'll talk you through the timeline, it became Sepsis Research, FEAT. We are, in fact, going to go through a rebranding exercise this year. And although we will have Fiona's, both her name and our logo is her signature, just out of interest. She used to leave that smiley face on the bedside notes of her patients in hospitals. And so it's endearing. It means a lot to everybody, and we will keep that across the charity. But we are Sepsis Research. We are forming a much larger charity, hence my appointment. And so just like cancer research sort of splitting from Macmillan and having the different roles, that's sort of where we are. But that's how it originated. Craig is an amazing man, and today incredibly active with the charity. And I am just delighted and honoured and privileged to be part of it.
It's such a selfless act that he has done this in light of what he went through with his wife and also having sepsis at the same time. I didn't know that part, but that's so tragic. And but he's doing a wonderful thing by keeping her memory alive.
It's interesting, Jackie, because a lot of people come to us and get engaged with the charity because their lives have changed, and you will know this, your listeners will know this. The old you, unfortunately, is no longer, and they're looking for hope and direction and something to fight for. And in the same way that you are doing these podcasts and helping others to realize and understand and move on, that's what Craig wanted. And he wanted to focus efforts on, let's try and stop others having to go through this. And there are two distinct sides of fighting sepsis. One is the awareness, which we do a bit of, but that's largely UK Sepsis Trust who are involved in that side. But we call that the present, if you like. So they're improving the present, getting people to realize the symptoms. We do this as well, and they do training, and they do a patient line and so on. But we are about research. We're the future. We are unlocking novel, innovative pieces of research done by incredible people. I've met some of our researchers. We have a wonderful doctor in Ireland, Dr. Becky Ingram, who's working on some vaccine technology, which is game-changing. And we are working with her as a partner. This would remove some of the reliance on antimicrobial or on antibiotics, and therefore the risk of antimicrobial resistance and so on. So, as I say, it's wonderful to be involved. We need to go as fast as we can, but our bit is the research, and that's what we do.
Yes. And it is much needed. Anytime I give a speech or talk about sepsis, that is one of the first questions that people ask. Why is so little known about it, and what kind of research is being done? And I think I wore, Abby had sent me a shirt, a Sepsis Research FEAT shirt. I wore it to one of my presentations, and I was able to tell them, I said, well, here's one organization over in the UK, but it's an organization who is studying the research. And of course, anything the UK discovers is going to help globally anyway.
We see sepsis as being one side of the same coin as antimicrobial resistance. And if we take a comparison, antimicrobial resistance is better known. There are national action plans in pretty much every country. There are 15,000 global projects. But in sepsis, there are far fewer. I think probably less than 50 researchers in the UK, maybe as little as 25, and the number of projects needs to grow. we have a strategy to seek out, encourage, and collaborate and fund maybe 100 projects a year. So obviously I need at the same time to raise more money to do that. And the charity is scaling. That's down to my appointment. We need to get into the millions of income and support that kind of level of research. That's what it's going to take, and a lot more. And I am happy. There's tremendous breakthroughs, some wonderful projects, and I'm happy to expand on some of those as we go.
Yes, yes. And actually, well, yes, and I do want to talk about those projects. And just so our audience understands here, like the impact of sepsis in the UK. Do you have numbers, figures? I hear often that the numbers we have are very conservative because all cases may not be reported, especially more loss. In the case of loss, it might be a multi-organ failure, but it was sepsis that caused the multi-organ failure, that kind of thing. So what are the numbers like?
That's correct, Jackie. There's a number of sets of data that we monitor. The Lancet report from the end of 25 talked about the global numbers for sepsis being 166 million cases with 49 million deaths. This is more than all the cancers put together. Now, I will caveat for your listeners that this is including the COVID figures. But then I will also caveat what you've just pointed to, that the data is often, I'm not going to say inaccurate, that's a bit accusatory, but incomplete. And the reason for that is there is insufficient diagnostics to prove that it is sepsis that people are dying of at the point of death. And therefore, the condition that they started with is reported on the death certificate. So I think that will improve as time goes on. We back research across the top 10 James Lind Alliance priorities, which is a program we put into place and funded. But they all sit in 5 components. They're either diagnostics or discovery or IPC, inpatient care, or post-sepsis syndrome, and then finally genomics. And so we're backing things in all these different categories, and we're seeing advances in all the areas in genomics. And I believe the future of medicine will be heavily involving genomics and possibly even reliant on it. We'll be able to see why some people are more susceptible to certain infections, and then, of course, what triggers those follow-on criticalities like sepsis, and is anything that we have genomically or within the DNA impacted by other things that we do and how we live, or is it hereditary? Are we passed it on? Is it a present from our parents? So we need to follow these through, but diagnostics is something that is missing. You need rapid diagnostics. During COVID, we developed the COVID tests, which anybody could use at home. I'm delighted to say we are working with some researchers who are looking at similar types of tests, and I hope the charity will be able to co-brand some of those and get them in the hands and implementation and creating benefit. So there are some things going on there. Certainly in the genomics, we're seeing amazing results. We backed Kenny Bailey from Edinburgh in 2018. He's now had the largest study of patients. I think over 40,000 patients have kindly, and their families have kindly involved people, so that he can get to results very quickly. And within 5 months of his first program, he was able to add value to the COVID situation. And that all came off the back of our seed financing. We went on to finance a further 200,000 pounds, but now they've had tens of millions, and there is a pandemic centre in Edinburgh. It's fabulous to see. So many of our small projects, which we try and kind of accelerate and incubate, if you like, go on to be much larger. There's two at the moment who are just gaining another £5 million of backing. And this, to me, is part of the key. We need more focus on sepsis, but to solve it, I can help make you aware. But once you've got it, you will need some treatments, and antibiotics are obviously used. But if we, for example, could interact with some sort of vaccine as well, where the condition was slowed or stopped much faster, this is revolutionary, and that's what we're looking at with Becky Ingram, who's coming out of Belfast. It's absolutely fascinating technology, and it specifically targets elements, and the results so far in the labs are positive, and that's as far as they've got. So, but that is our task: is to encourage more research. It's to encourage collaboration. So where somebody in discovery has an accurate methodology for doing something, that might apply to somebody in diagnostics who can't quite get the results to always act in the same way. And so we find people coming to us for funding, and we say, well, really, you should team up. And so that's part of the accelerative collaboration that we would encourage.
A vaccine would be amazing, because we have vaccines for flu and pneumonia and even COVID now, and the at-home testing for COVID that was developed quite rapidly, and it does work. I've tried them, and they do work. They're very accurate. So that is fascinating. The genomics also is an area of interest I've been reading about, because some families seem to have more than one family member who has developed sepsis. So anecdotally speaking, I guess some people have begun to wonder, is there something in our genes that allows our immune system to do what it does and, try to shut down all of our organs simply because it's attacking an infection?
I mean, it is a fascinating space, and I know there's a lot of work going on, and overlaid with that is proteomics, the study of proteins, and indeed some of the COVID vaccines came out of proteomics on top of genomics. And so I have to admit to your listeners at this point that I am not a clinician and I am not a medical officer. So I understand things to a level, and I understand their funding to a great level. But this is going on, and there's certainly some major advances, and people like Kenny Bailey running his genomic project are fascinated and very interested in, what infections are impacting people at what rate and how are they reacting and why. And even though not all his work is centered around sepsis, it is really, and this is partly down to the funding models, where an enormous amount of sepsis research was funded by biotech and pharma without results being able to be implemented. But I think that is shifting now, and with this renewed emphasis. I spoke earlier in England, we have the National Health Service, which I'm sure you will have all heard of.
Yes.
And they prioritize, what are likely to be problems, and sepsis is now rising to the top 3, aligning with antimicrobial resistance, and these two go hand in hand. Any kind of vaccine, and the vaccine we're talking about would fight what's known as the escape pathogens. These are pathogens where there are little or no antibiotics to combat them. Yeah. And it can be administered in more than one at a time. So it can be a collective vaccination, and would potentially be, and we're just talking in the future here, it's not available yet, pre-operation or early stages in some sort of condition. So if these sorts of things can be taken through the whole process and the trial and are effective, both antimicrobial resistance and sepsis will be affected, and the results will be impactful.
Now, and these are research going on like mostly in the UK, or is it global, or?
So Sepsis Research, FEAT, we are interested in research all over. We are part of the European Sepsis Alliance, and we feed into the World Sepsis Alliance. We're not yet in America, and we should be, Jackie. So that's why I'm so
Yes.
excited about this podcast and being part of it. And it isn't something that's geographically selective. It crosses borders. It's potentially hereditary and genomic and so on. An example is that we collect data for researchers under this PPIE campaign, and so we very much like people to talk to us, engage with the charity, and there are many benefits of doing that. Many people end up being volunteers, ambassadors. Their families end up running or doing campaigns themselves, but the stories are critical for research, and it's the data and the circumstances around the stories. We talked about Craig earlier. It's knowing that this onset reaches what we call the cliff so fast. Well, why is that the case? And so we have been in talks with Manchester, and we work closely with Manchester University and their hospitals. They are leading cancer specialists, but also leading sepsis specialists. And they work with international bodies like Médecins Sans Frontières. And if we could have access to patients internationally and get stories outside of what I call normal Western conditions, that's very useful for research to look at a much more balanced picture and not just be taking high income countries, beg your pardon, because often it is the LMICs, the low middle income countries, where these problems are also very prevalent, if not more prevalent. So
And they
we're very
impact children a lot more in developing countries. I mean,
yes.
sepsis is like the number one killer of children there.
I mean, it is indiscriminate. It doesn't pick an age group. And we have a maternal campaign. In fact, that's our next campaign launching May, June. We've just taken on a new digital agency in London. And their founder had sepsis during her, maternity phases. And, it's incredible how it strikes so many people.
Yes.
We put a lot of effort into students because I think they are a group that are underserviced and they don't understand the risks of what might be fresh as flu actually could be sepsis. And one of our ambassadors and recently agreed to do this is Lily McGarry, who's from Cardiff University, and I expect some of you will have read about her or seen her on our site. Incredible individual, now a quadruple amputee, no longer the fit runner and individual that she was, training to be a doctor. Her life has been completely changed. Well, I'm incredibly proud of what she now does, which is to come out and speak on behalf of both our charity and others. But she's an ambassador for us and wants to get involved. She wants to finish her doctor's exams, and I think she will be a force. And she's a little bit like Beth, who you've already interviewed.
Yes.
Remarkable woman, as are you, Jackie, and I'm sure are your listeners. We all need to get involved. If you have the strength and the commitment, I think you'll get both the value and so much more out of it. And what happens when people come to our charity, anybody, whether they are the families or the sufferers or whether they've lost somebody, they find a new group, a new tribe, a new way, and they tell us they get hope. And you know what? That's part of why I do this. I've spent decades in corporate, so in first and private sector. And actually, we need to do some good. We need to create the third bottom line within corporates and give back. And we need to help stop or slow down these conditions. And so for me, joining something like Sepsis Research FEAT, as I said at the beginning, is an honor and a privilege. And I want to take it into this sort of 5, 10, 20 million range and work with Wellcome and, really start going international and so on. So this is sometime down the track. We are a small charity, sub 1 million today. So we've got a bit of work to do. But we have a wonderful team with huge hearts who are committed to following Craig's mandate and his vision, which is to stop sepsis. And
Exactly. And you're
it
small
really
but
is.
mighty.
Well, I think we are growing. You've got one of your questions was about
Yes.
where do we go from here, and
Right.
we would like a greater voice. We want to work with the whole ecosystem. So people who are either suffering post sepsis or families of, carers, clinicians, researchers, similarly to how we did in the James Lind Alliance priority setting exercise. We want to work with all of them to improve this space and so have a greater voice. And I'm delighted to say that we are working with the NHS in England on their 10-year plan and under the research components for sepsis, speeding up innovation, and they are producing a modern service framework, which is going to be the future plan of what we do. And I think that tips nicely into your question about the registry where, yes,
Yes.
absolutely, we need that. And I think I'm aware of various studies between 2023 and 25, which I think are now feeding into this NHS plan. And I dare say the announcements of how this is going to go forward will emerge. So I think a registry is needed and something that would be good. And we would certainly be keen to be involved with, if that is the right thing. So there's people working on that at the moment.
Right. I've been on about the registry. Sepsis Alliance, of course, here in the US is pushing for a registry as well. I mean, it's really the only way to really find out how many people are affected is you got to know where the patients are, who they are, and, how everybody is being impacted. I also think the antimicrobial resistance thing, I just wanted to go back briefly on that too, is so important, for our audience. If you haven't heard it in previous episodes where we have talked about antimicrobial resistance, AMR for short, and that's basically when microbes get so feisty and so strong that they become resistant to the current antibiotics that we have to treat them. And one of the ways is overusing antibiotics, or a lot of users of antibiotics in sepsis patients depend on antibiotics. We have to have these very strong antibiotics in order so that we can survive. And so, I think being involved in that, Stephen, as well, and, also promoting that as a very critical issue worldwide as well. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the antimicrobial resistance and the sepsis. And as I'm always trying to point out to people as well, it goes hand in hand with cancer. It goes hand in hand with
It does.
patients because cancer patients, lung disease patients, all of us are more susceptible to developing sepsis.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting for me. I'd spent 3 years working in antimicrobial resistance prior to joining the charity. And in a way, that was the pathway that led me here because
Yeah.
the two are so interconnected. Antimicrobial resistance is a global problem across industries, across, how we live, what we eat. It's a big issue. 50% of antibiotics are used in livestock and agriculture, and from fish to cattle, and it's all part of intensive farming. We need other ways of doing that.
Mhm.
But yes, you're right. In sepsis, we rely on antibiotics, and if we can control antimicrobial resistance, then the dosage
Yeah.
and types of antibiotics would be less restrictive. Equally, I think we need another solution, Jackie, and that's why I'm keen for us to look at other ways. If we can understand the cause or causation or correlation of why people, and that's we were talking about genomics and DNA, and then the vaccine technology, and I know that health service, senior health service people are very keen on vaccines. So I hope that we will be able to get somewhere with that.
Right. Exactly. And I think it just all demonstrates that sepsis does not exist in a vacuum. It's not a condition or a syndrome that isn't impacted or doesn't impact other things. And that I think should lead some of the urgency in, why there are organizations like Sepsis Research FEAT that is focusing on getting funding and getting research and learning more about this condition. I think it's imperative.
I mean, I don't know whether you would agree, Jackie, but we feel that sepsis is some 15 years behind in awareness compared to cancer. And yet,
Yeah.
as we've already stated from the numbers, it is a much bigger problem. And I was at the House of Commons at a reception on Wednesday in London at Westminster, and met with the chief executive, Bupa, and he was talking about, well, he didn't know that the figures were that big, and I was sort of going, right, well, this is part of the problem. He knows it's a problem, but he didn't wasn't aware of the Lancet results and things, and so. This is something we've got to address, and I think it's slowly permeating that at a time of geopolitical risk, which I am very sorry to see we are in a much greater period of now. Um, it is going to be more prevalent, both AMR. Just we can see what's happening in Europe with Ukraine. There's more antimicrobial resistance being experienced there, and there will be more sepsis. And so
Yes.
this is something that has to be now dealt with. It's coming to we're not at pandemic levels, but it's certainly at pandemic risk, and so I think that's why the funding is being addressed and unlocked, and why programs are now accelerating in research. And we've been funding, as you know, since 2013, and they were getting small amounts apart from one or two. So this year, to see two, possibly three projects get 5 million each, this is the beginning of a sort of a new era, and I'm delighted that this is the case.
Exactly. And I think we should have learned, hopefully have learned through COVID-19 that we shouldn't wait until it's like knocking at our door, until the problem is that big that then it's too late to put the old saying, to put the horse back in the barn. You can't do that. I mean, this has to be done now.
You know that, and I know that. It's including everybody else who have a lot going on. I mean, you're not surprised. All countries are now dealing with energy and inflation and other things, and so budgets are changing, and so everything is always continually shifting, and you've got this very complex world that we're in, and we need to do everything we can with your listeners as well to amplify the message about sepsis. It's not going to go away until we can find some major new solutions. We hope that those are in play now, but it'll be a decade until we can get them into implementation. And one of the things you asked me is, are we going to have any major events or things
Yes.
that might be game changers? Well, I'm delighted to say that we are hosting an event in association with Manchester University and NIHR, who are the funding body of the NHS in the UK. And so we're hosting an event to get all the ecosystem, and we've got post-sepsis survivors and PPIE patients, obviously the clinical side, corporates, biotech and pharma, all coming together, clinicians, and we'll be looking at what is it that slows down or potentially stops impact and creates the blockage. What is the barrier? Funding is immensely complex and can be long-winded, and research tends to end up in silos because of intellectual property risks. And so at the last meeting, we talked about how we could maybe act like the technology industry and have background IP and then the foreground IP, which is developed together, perhaps is on a shared basis. And so these are the sorts of things we want to drive out from the conferences, faster and more research, but collaboration where collaboration couldn't take part before. We are close to the COVID conditions. And therefore, we need to rethink. We need to focus on the goal, which is stopping sepsis and reducing the mortality, the suffering, and finding answers where you could perhaps just go into hospital, have a vaccine or something else, and you come out, and it was just a moment instead of a complete life changing circumstance. So we are putting on a conference on the 2nd of December, and I will follow up with you afterwards, because if you'd like to beam in from the US, you would be very welcome. And
absolutely, I would love it.
You could appear on the screen with our team. So let's follow up with that.
Yes.
So yes, we're doing that. I'm obviously trying to get involved with policymakers and government agencies. I'm actually back at the House of Commons by coincidence on Monday afternoon. So this is an ongoing thing, greater exposure. We are an originally Scottish charity. We're registered as a Scottish charity, but we work UK wide, and you've heard me talk about Ireland, and we work in Wales and all across England. So we have to get out there now. We have to meet people like yourself and your listeners. We need to enact with any of our fundraisers for whom and with whom we're so grateful. And of course, the research community. And I spend quite a bit of time now in Manchester because of the work that they're doing. And we're sort of building out a hub there with integrated patient and university and hospital and research, and then with fundraising elements and events going on top of that. And I think that's a model we can build on. And so I'm very, very pleased that we're out there now. And that's really was the charity's initiative to take on as CEO. I'm delighted. I'm the first one of this charity, and my job, they asked me to scale it, and I said, well, you need to be somewhat bigger than that. So if you don't mind being somewhat bigger than that, I'm in. And so, and we're onto that, and we're talking to international sporting partners and all sorts of people. And if there's anybody of your listeners who would like to contact us or get involved, then I'm trying to form that bridge with other continents. And as I said, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And yes, listeners, anyone, in the audience, as you've heard Stephen say, always on the lookout for those critical partnerships, for joining hands, joining together. Sepsis is a heavy thing, and it takes a heavy lift. Many hands make lighter work for that. And, just working together and everything. And it takes money. Fundraising is very, very important because, unfortunately, clinical trials and research is costly.
Very,
that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So thank you, Stephen, for everything you do, and Abby and Beth and everyone. I mean, you all are so wonderful, and I'm absolutely delighted to have met you all.
Thank you, Jackie. You're very kind. You asked me on one of your questions, what would I leave for the audience? And
Yes.
I have to say a big thank you to you, Jackie. You know, you are an incredible force, and you are obviously championing this issue, as I am sure are your listeners. So I thank them too for their time. And, you know, the more we all collaborate and get together as a network, the more we can do something about it. And my message is on the back of that, you're not alone. You know, there are people in our charity, other charities, agencies, governments, and, you know, there are people listening, there are people doing things, and we're fighting and going as hard as we can. It is rising up in importance and priority. And I think you will see a shift across the next 5 to 10 years, and some breakthroughs. And if we can be part of that and you can be part of that, then that's what this is all about. So, you know, it's a pleasure to be with you. Well, it's my afternoon, your morning.
Yes.
uh, and, you know, I'm really, really delighted we could have this chance to chat.
As well. And that's a brilliant message for everybody listening, is that they aren't alone. People who find this podcast, I'll see in the comments, someone finds it and they listen in and listen to survivor stories, and they're like, I'm not alone. I thought I was alone. But Stephen's right, everyone, you're not alone. And we're all in this together, I would say.
And if they want to, some people wouldn't want to, but if you do want to get involved with either the charity or the research, I think you'll find it tremendously fulfilling to be part of fighting back. And you only had to talk to Beth to see that. You know, she's an extraordinary woman. And, you know, we have many more people like that. So I encourage all to get involved where you can.
And I will be listing all the links to Sepsis Research FEAT and anything else, the events and the kilt walk and, you know, all these wonderful things that you've already been involved in will be in the description box below. So I do want to thank everyone for listening in today and watching us and learning more about this very, very huge crisis of sepsis that we all need to take a look at. And anyway, and I also want to remind our viewers that this is for information purposes only. If you have a medical problem, you suspect you have sepsis or you're sick or something, you know, call 911, go to your local emergency room, go to your doctor. But this is not medical advice, information only. And thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Stephen.
Welcome. My pleasure. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, listeners.